It's hard to, a couple of you asked me some questions, about the up and down of the season. And so I was going to go through some things that Matt and I kind of sat down and looked at and tried to figure out. So I think we all, including me, lose perspective on what is what. I don't think there's any question that of the years I've been here, it was probably one of the more successful seasons if you look at schedule, team, injuries, and all the things that we put together. One of the more unbelievable stats that he came up with was 14 of our last 18 games were against NCAA teams. The ones that weren't were Iowa, who was on the bubble right till the end, and that was in a neutral site, and then 2 games against Purdue and Nebraska, and nobody wants to go to Purdue. So if you looked at why I said it was such a grind down the stretch, when you look at 14 out of 18 games, was really no room to breathe. I'm willing to bet that nobody went through that kind of schedule. The accomplishments that this team has had have been great, continuing the Sweet 16, the NCAA appearances. But it was really funny as I looked through and said, boy, we weren't a very good rebounding team this year, according to our standards. And I think we ended up tying at plus 7.6. I think we had one less rebound. Is that it?
Yeah, it's a fractional.
Thank God it was Duke math, and they said that one less rebound still ended up the same percentage. So that was good. And our field goal percentage defense at 39, our scoring defense at 59. I mean, considering the teams we played, would borderline phenomenal. And stuff that I didn't even realize. The individual accomplishments with Keith getting 1,000 points. We had the honors of Harris, Appling, and Nix. Getting on a second team, Payne, second team, Appling, Nix, an honorable mention. Nothing to write home about in some ways, but a lot to write home about because there's only so many people that can get on it. We had some incredible performances by Harris. When you think that he gets Freshman of the Year with a lot of good freshmen in this league and playing hurt probably more often than not, I think it speaks volumes for him, both defensively and offensively. I think we saw the emergence of Adrian Payne go from an average player, really, to a player that some are talking about can leave early, and I think that's a great tribute to him. He was never able to play a lot of minutes up until this past year. That skyrocketed. He wasn't as good a rebounder. That skyrocketed with some strength. He was one of the leaders in rebounding in our league, and he was close, still might end up the leading free throw shooter in our league. He's at 84.8. which is unbelievable. His field goal percentage was off the charts. When you see a guy like Nix lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, get in better shape, go from 27% free throw shooter to almost 75 in the league this year, that speaks volumes. I won't say you, I always look at the negative things more than the positive things. So I decided not to make this press conference that way, so it'll probably ruin some of your days, but make me feel a little better. I look at Dawson and especially Dawson, Trice, and Harris. Put it into perspective when a couple guys I was with at the tournament after the game, I sat with a couple of guys that have coached at different levels, and they said, you look at a Kelly kid, and he came back and scored 37 points. And then, I won't say struggled, but kind of struggled the next 7 or 8 games. I look at Brandon Dawson, and I started laughing, and they brought it up, that how long it takes to come back. And I look at him, his first game back was his best game of the year probably, against Connecticut, when maybe it was all adrenaline, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. But maybe you just realize that, a 2-month injury took a senior a lot of time to come back from. And here, a 6 or 7, 8 month injury has frustrated everybody at times, but what that kid went through and what he did is really remarkable. And considering that most players get better between their freshman and sophomore year, he got none of it. And I was thinking Trice got half a year, and then I found out from our doctors that, he missed all of June, all of July, practiced one time before he went home, August 10th, I think it was, last day we could practice in the summer. And so he missed 3 months. And sometimes I lose sight of those things, So I think those two guys did a lot more than maybe I give them credit for. And Valentine, here's a kid who started 15 games, came off the bench, averaged quite a few minutes, was their fourth leading scorer, was second on the team in assists, had some turnover issues early, but I think for the most part fixed those. Costello, who didn't play more than 8 minutes, I think one time in the first 23 games, and in the last 13, 14, he averaged over 8 minutes, and so he made some progress. Ghana was a guy that I think we've all questioned, I've questioned, but yet I thought he played pretty well his last game, and I think he went from a guy who basketball didn't mean enough to this year where basketball meant a lot to him, but he was a better 3 o'clock player than later in the day player. And hopefully by next year now, he's ready to take a step, because I started to see some more things even in the Duke game that I think is going to give him a chance to be more of a player. The big question marks are keeping guys healthy. That's a big one for us. I don't think there's any question Trice, not only was he out all summer, but then he got the concussion, then he gets back for a month and he's good. Then the later part of January, he gets that other concussion. We didn't think it was as bad. And that made it hard on him and us. Probably right now, at least Adrian Payne's situation. And, we'll do the same for Keith and Gary. I mean, the NBA, I've been in touch with them, not with the people that do it underground, but I'm trying to do it from the guys that are going to be making a difference. And what they do is they meet, I think it's right after the Final Four, around Portsmouth time. That committee meets and gives you a general idea of what's going on. By then we'll know who's even thinking about coming out, who's not, as far as teams around the country. And we'll get the best situation for Adrian. He's got his high school coach and his assistant coach back home, and myself and him, and we're just going to sit down and figure out what's best for his situation. And right now, I have no clue. I think in a lot of ways it would benefit him to come back, but depending on what he's projected as would determine my advice for him. And trying to keep in the fact, as I got calls yesterday about, look at Trey Burke in our state, he bettered himself. Look at the guys from Florida a couple years ago. They both bettered themselves. I've been warned on this. It's hard to say what pick will he be matters. So if some of you say he's the 10th pick, he's the 5th pick, he's the 27th pick, it's when are you mature enough, when can you handle both physically and mentally the grind that keeps you in for longevity, not for a cup of coffee. What hasn't been talked about is the number of guys that are in there for a cup of coffee. And so in saying all that, Adrian Payne has been about a model of kid as we could have here. I mean, what he's done in school, what he's done around our community, what he's done, his improvement in basketball. There would be no way that I would want anything but the best for Adrian Payne, and yet I will voice my opinion when it's time to, what I think is right. And Gary and Keith, Gary, there's going to be some decisions on whether, what we need to do with his shoulder. We're going to meet with doctors and specialists and figure that out. But I will do the same thing for them, because, you know, as we've seen throughout the year with different people, if I listen to most of those draft logs and all those bloggers and those uneducated individuals that put out so many different, the draft now, we must have added 75 teams to the NBA because there's 80 first-round picks, and so that makes it confusing for kids a little bit. And so what we're going to do is do the same due diligence we'll do with anybody that has any interest. And people ask me all the time, well, you don't think so-and-so is, you know, why doesn't he want to come back another year? Why doesn't he want to? Let me tell you something. Every kid on my roster wants to go pro early. Everyone. And I'll make a better statement. Every kid on 99% of the programs in the country would like to leave early for the NBA if they could. So, I mean, that's just the way an athlete is. The neat part about Adrian is coming, has been well publicized, his academic struggles early in high school and what he's done. And I think he's going to be 15 hours away from graduating after this semester. Maybe 20. It's, you know, almost incredible. And how much that plays a part, the chance to go to Final Fours, that's an individual thing. I've had some players, the Cleaveses, the Magics, I didn't have him, but I mean, I look back on players, even Steve Smith, I mean, their goals were those were part of their goals, and so they stayed to fulfill what their dreams and goals are. But every kid's a little different on that, and so we will be looking into that. And last but not least, improvement over the summer. When I look at guys that I think can make an immediate impact over the summer, I mean, there's no doubt that in the junior class, I think Payne can take another big step. You know, Sunday I met with him about some things. He's in there watching tape. He's in there shooting already. He is proving that if he makes the same steps he made from his sophomore to his junior year and stays healthy, I mean, you know, that kid's got a chance to be hanging his own banner in the building. And if you look at Dawson or Appling to stay in that class, I think the end of the year, he made progress throughout the year in different ways, but the end of the year he was definitely shooting the ball so much better. And I think he has a better understanding of what it really takes to be a great player. And so I'm expecting him to make great strides in the sophomore class. There's no question that Dawson and Trice just having a summer. If you go by the coach's theory that players are made in the winter teams are made in the winter and players are made in the summer, that's one theory. The second theory is most guys improve the most from their freshman to sophomore year. Well, those guys got both those things taken away from them. And I think just judging, you know, Trice still played 20 minutes a game even through that. Dawson probably played 7 minutes a game through that. I think you're going to see a big jump in those two guys, which leads our other two sophomores, which is Ghana and Russell Bird. And Alex Ghana, I told you last year at this time, he had to fall in love with basketball. I think that process has started. We forget that Goran Suton had to do that. And some guys it took to their fourth and fifth year. And, you know, if you watch Ghana in practice, he shoots the ball well. He's very athletic up and down. He's not as athletic this way, but that's something we're going to really home in on this summer. And then Russell Bird, probably the most frustrating guy to most fans of Michigan State. I'm going out on a limb and saying that I still think and still believe in the kid. Yeah, it's been hard. And as much as we think it's been hard on us, it's been incredibly hard on him. Whether we believe it or not, he was one of the best shooters that I've recruited here. And there was a reason. It was Kentucky and Indiana and different schools like that recruiting him. And when you go through the amount of surgeries, it kind of reminds me of Delvon Rowe in a way. I believed in the bottom of my heart Delvon Rowe would be a 2-year and out guy. Still would have been. So Russell has had to go through 3 surgeries and all the things. And I guess it doesn't bother me if anybody believes in him, but give him a chance, because this will be the first true summer where he is going to be 99% healthy and no scars. Hopefully the scar tissue is gone, and there's no question that kid could still help us because we need a shooter. And then you get in our freshman class, and the 3 guys that have been playing are probably 3 as good a guys, good as students, good a workers as we've had in a same class. And I think Valentine shows some leadership. Gary Harris is just a flat-out talent, and Costello is improved as the year went. And I think with the work he's going to put in this summer, he's going to take a huge step. I guess I've covered everybody except Kenny Kaminsky, who the advantage of letting media into practice, you all can see that he might be as quick a shooter, deep range a shooter. And I think the question mark is always with guys, and we can say it with Bird, and who shoots good in practice, who shoots good in games, and that is something that has to be determined. But I've seen Kenny shoot it like that in AAU tournaments in high school. He's even shot a little better. He's definitely gotten stronger. Vork has worked with him all winter long. I think he's getting quicker. He's definitely a better jumper, and he's a tough kid. He played football, was a tight end, and again, it's a matter of keeping him healthy, which it doesn't seem to be any problem. And that would be it. So I think I've covered everybody, and the only thing I would close this saying is don't underestimate what these guys did this year, because when you think of the schedule and the amount of games without a break, some have asked me, some of you asked me about our consistency. We were pretty consistent. We weren't always great, but we were pretty consistent. And I say that because every game we played in, we were in. And that's consistency. At the end of the year, we're still playing for a Big Ten championship. That's consistency. The NCAA tournament, our defense and rebounding that maybe wasn't quite as good during the year was really good in the tournament. And that was consistency. We didn't get the job done against Duke, and that's what'll drive me all spring, summer, and fall. I guess we've been consistent in that area too, unfortunately. And I got to find a way to remedy that. Questions? That was long. I didn't even get to all of my stuff.
Coach, I'll give you a chance to get to some more then. Have you ever had this much of a hard luck group? You talk about the injuries, but nobody first team Big Ten, the bracket of the region of doom, as they call it, an injury to pain right before you play a game. I mean, have you ever had a season where you think a team's accomplished more and actually gotten less maybe credit or good fortune out of it?
Well, I think we got a lot of credit. I think we were a 3 seed. I think that's credit. I think we, all kidding aside, I think you guys, I didn't have any major issues with the big picture of how this team was perceived as far as, Keith went through a little bit of a tough stage. A couple guys did, but I just think that in the end, you got to be lucky, as I say sometimes. And the injury to pain on that awful day here before we left was severe. I mean, it wasn't severe in hampering from playing, although at the beginning of that game he looked out of whack, but it was really severe in our preparation for it. But, you know, people get injured. Look at Duke. I mean, they had that kid, and supposedly Curry didn't practice half the time. I mean, you know, you go through those things. I mean, some teams that are really lucky don't have many at all, and if you don't have many at all, your chances of advancing are better. And some teams, you know, have some, and we had some. I think the hardest thing for me to deal with this year was Gary and Brandon and Travis. It is kind of, I don't blame you for laughing at me, but I was thinking about it, and the reason those three were the hardest is because I didn't know. You know, if Brandon, he never missed a practice all year. I mean, I haven't talked to one human being on this planet about injuries with a knee that said, did it swell? Did it do this? No. It was just unbelievable. But going into the Memphis game on the first play of the game when he didn't go up and dunk one, I still believe that somewhere inside of him is not the confidence in what he can do. And that's hard to deal with. You know, a sprained ankle that's this big, you can see it, you can feel it, you can talk about it, you can go through it. I had Travis in my office yesterday. You know, we sat here last summer. Travis Trice should have been a captain, okay? When we voted for him in July, I mean, again, there wasn't as much made about it, but there were a lot of us worried about not whether he was going to play. It was way worse than that. Way worse. I mean, they couldn't figure out what it was. It was in his head, the headaches. I mean, you know, it made everybody believe of tumors and cancer and problems. And I mean, there were some scary things, you know, and then all of a sudden the drastic weight loss. And I mean, still to this day, there are no answers. And then when you get a concussion, you know, if your head would swell or your ear would get big or your nose would change or something that you could grasp. But when you look at a guy and he just looks at you and you can't grasp those things, that is difficult. Difficult for a coach, difficult for a player, trainers, doctors, media, fans. You know, you can't see it and you don't get to do anything. At least with Russell, you know he had 3 operations, you know. Brandon a little bit, you knew he had the operation, but for Gary and Travis, I think Gary finally told our trainers at the end of the year, you know, he was in pain a lot of times. I mean, you saw the first half of that game. Whenever he went like this, the minute he came out, you know, it took me 4 or 5 times to realize that. And that's not an excuse for him. It's nothing. It just, I would come to practice and I'd call his dad and I'd say, you know, we gotta get him more, you know, body language got to change, you know, me and body language, you know. Well, you know, driving home on a bus, I figured out why the body language, you know, some of those practices, he was hurt and he's just not going to say nothing. And I can't tell you how proud I am of those guys for that kind of stuff, and yet how ticked off I am at them, because it made my days hard too. You know, sometimes I'd come to you guys and I almost didn't even know what to say because, you know, you couldn't figure it out. But for that kid to play through what he did, for Trice to play through what he did, and then get it recurring and then recurring again, and for BJ, you know, who had star status, and you know, to go through what he did. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to handle, but it is what it is, and it happened. And guess what? They survived and we survived. And usually what that means is there's going to be better things down the road, and I really believe there will be.
Oh, just to clarify on the pain thing, is this the advisory board, the official thing that, like, you submit your name and so, or is there other people that you're actually talking to in the league as on top of that, or how's that all going to work?
Well, not, it's before you submit anything, they have an advisory board and an underclass. They get about 6 or 8 GMs to get input from everybody to give you some clue. And then with that clue, then you can, put your name in or not. And but I'm also calling friends of mine or just cold calling some guys, and I'm asking his high school coach and assistant coach. It's such a delicate area because you got to realize who you're dealing with. You're dealing with agents. They're going to be telling guys one thing. You're dealing with media who are going to be telling Joe Fan, who's going to be, in the days of texting and tweeting, can't go a whole press conference without getting that in now. Even the last one, we got to nail it somehow. You got all those things. So what I want to make sure is done is that me, Art, Mark, and AP are on the same page each and every day, so nobody can wedge between us. Because, there's kids that have to make decisions every year, and then there's some kids that you really are concerned with their decisions because they don't have a lot of people around them. AP doesn't have a lot of people around him, and I just want to make sure he does the right thing for Adrian Payne. It'll work out for us either way. We'll still suit up a team if he's gone, and we'll still be damn good if he's gone. Does it maybe take us to a new level? Are you seeing more kids staying in? Does he have some added incentives with graduation and all that and the situation he's been in? Yes. Are people going to tell him, are you worried about injuries? Are you worried about not getting better? First thing I told him, we can make this real easy. If you're not going to work as hard from now until next March as you worked from last March till this March, leave. Go immediately. Don't worry about nothing. Just put your name in, because you will go downhill. And there are a lot of people that do that. And that's why when I walked in here Sunday, I went to church, Easter Sunday, took Stephen out to breakfast, and I came in here, and Adrian was here. In fact, I saw him out at breakfast, but he was here, and he was watching film and shooting, and so I have no doubt that he has all-American qualities, and a lot of good things can happen. I have no doubt that he'll get better, which will improve his draft pick no matter where he goes, but it just depends on what's out there and what people think of him, and we'll make an educated decision, and he'll make the final decision. I'll give him educated information best I can.
Tom, you spent an extended stretch of this season calling this the strangest 20-4 team, the strangest this and this team. Looking back on it now, do you still feel that way?
I do.
And have you figured them out more?
Yeah, I do.
Or do they still
I do.
confuse
It took me to see a Kelly or to see a Curry. It took me to really sit back and say, why did I think it was strange? Well, in my mind, I knew Harris could do so many more things, getting out running, the offensive rebounding. Didn't really know, where he was. And in my nights, I'd sit up and say, how can I help Dawson do this better or that better? Because I know if he just does these few things a little better, no matter what his shot is like, no matter what things he didn't get to work on last summer, he'll be better, And every time we got Trav going, there was another injury, and the poor kid, I think I'm hoping he got up to 170 by the time it was done. But as I told him, it's not what's right for college basketball when you're his size, and I think it hurt him in some games. But he is one of our best shooters, and all that's being done without a summer to work on it. And so it was a confusing team for me because there were times I didn't think we were that good because of what we had, or times we played without some of those guys. I think, what did Travis alone miss? 9-10 games. And, we were sprinkling different people in there, and so it was a little harder for me to evaluate, but not in a negative way. It wasn't like I didn't think we were pretty consistent in how we guarded. We were pretty consistent in how we rebounded. We were actually pretty consistent in how we shot the ball. It wasn't what I would call great, but it wasn't off the charts bad many games either. and we were really consistent as far as how we played teams. You know, the best teams in this league, whether it be Indiana, Michigan, Ohio State, Minnesota. You know, I mean, we were right there in every game, and Wisconsin. So I felt good about that. I felt good at who we had played in the preseason and evaluating. I just never felt as comfortable because it was always like plug a hole, another one would pop up, another injury. It wasn't real smooth. And then we forget, you know, my godson, you know, Nix was Nix, you know. I mean, he's going to say something to you that I got to reprimand him for and yell at him for, and yet, you know, the funniest thing of all was the last game in the locker room, and that I thought he handled himself unbelievably. I almost felt like, you know, why didn't you grow up? Then I kind of blamed myself. Why didn't I redshirt him his freshman year? You know, could he have been a Peterson? Could he have been a guy that, you know, I mean, he's still going to get some chances, but you just kind of realize everybody grows up a little differently. And at the end of the year, when it was all said and done, he was really good, really, really good, and I felt good about that too. So it was a team that I couldn't get my arms around everybody. I was honest with you guys, and you guys didn't take it negatively either. So I give you credit for that. When you don't have a leader, a true leader, it's hard to have a pulse on your team. So every day, I mean, I was just guessing and talking to guys at night and doing this and doing that. It was harder, you know. It was harder. But now that it's over, it probably taught me as much as I taught them. It was different than most teams I've coached, and it turned out real positive. And I think that'll help me down the road too.
Do you feel like you ever got it, though?
Do I feel like we ever got it?
You said it's tough to get the pulse. Did you end up finding it?
I felt like after the last game, I had finally found it on Derek. You know, I finally realized how much everything did mean to him, and this. And, you know, when we were in the locker room and Russ looks at me, he says, I promise you that him and Trice, they said, you know, a couple neat things. I promise you this summer I'm working. Nobody can believe in me, but I'm going to prove it. And I looked at him, I said, you know what? That was the right thing to say. You know, Trice was so upset about the loss that it reminded me of the Cleveses back then. It reminded me of El Anaganya saying something when we got beat. I think it was down in Texas in the Elite Eight, and the next year we went to a Final Four or whatever it was. And, you know, I mean, almost making you know what, we're going to use this to fuel us all summer. I don't want to forget the loss. I said, well, you know, it's okay. Don't forget it for 24 hours and we'll move on. You know, no. Trice said, I want to remember it all summer. You know what? I like that. So I started figuring out that part of them. And it's just hard because we were pretty young when you look at it. We were either young in age or young in experience. And I just don't think you'll ever realize how much a summer off hurts a kid, especially in basketball where it's a skill sport. And to have two of those guys miss the entire one, you know, that made it hard too. Not their fault, just hard. So I don't know. I'm answering it like a politician running for office. I can't say I totally did up to the last game, but I feel very comfortable that they gave me just about everything they had to give. It wasn't an underachieving team.
Is there, with the way the short window is between when you have to declare and when you have to pull your name out, is that fair to players, and is there any benefit to not putting your name in if it's only a week anyway to get all the information?
Yeah, I think there's benefit to not putting your name in because the NBA doesn't care. I mean, they're going to figure out who is what, and so I don't know if that matters. What matters is you keep it in and they're going to draft you. I don't know, you know, there's a lot of people that you got to be fair to. Is it fair to the teammates on the team if a star guy is not coming back and you can't do anything? Is it fair to the player, you know? Would it be fair as they changed the rules so there wasn't so much pressure on these guys, if you ask me, my opinion.
So there's more.
No, change it so that you get a longer period of time that you don't have to be under that kind of pressure. In other words, if it was a 2 or 3 year rule, in Payne's case, it wouldn't matter because he'd be in that same situation. But we got to remember, even him, he lost his whole freshman year with the shoulder and the injury, and I thought, as much as he grew basketball-wise, I thought he grew maturity-wise more. And as dumb as we look back at different things that happen, that goofy little incident in Penn State, maybe it helped him. I mean, I said maybe it did, because he realized what some little negative thing can do, I saw more focus after that. And so everything hits guys in a different way. As far as the rule goes, the longer you drag it out, too, I mean, you should be able to get some idea from the NBA. The longer it drags out, the more middle people that get involved, and that was getting to be a zoo. The more illegal things can happen, and that was getting to be a zoo. It's like making a decision on a school. For the most part, after you get a little bit of information and, they visit the schools, what's going to change? The school color stays the same, the pep band's the same, everything's the same. So, it's a tough decision for a kid, but if it's that tough, if it ends up that tough, it's probably not worth the chance, unless a kid needs to because he's flunking out of school or he's had problems. To me, to make a major decision like that when you still have an opportunity to come back, it better be pretty clear cut. If it's a coin flip, I wouldn't be going. I'd be staying unless I decided that, I'm not that hard a worker. I don't really want to work all summer. I had a good year, so let's hit the road. And that's the first thing I told him. If you're thinking that, don't even bother putting your name in, just declare, and that's it. And of course, I know he's going to work because I saw what a year did. Now, if it was 2 years ago, I think I'd feel differently. And that's what I'm saying to Agana, can things change in a year? Yeah, they can change in a year. They can change in a year. You can change what is important to you, Is it the girls? Is it the video games? Is it your buddies? Is it your family? Or is it your sport? Is it basketball? What do you want to do? And I think Adrian Payne, he went from a guy, he didn't even like watching basketball. He never watched any games. And now he knows some of the players and some of the teams even. So I'm jacked for him, That's a step. I mean, I can tell you a lot of other players that didn't, that would surprise you. I'll even go back because he's in town still. Pep wasn't a guy that watched, Some guys don't, but you got to have a passion for what you're doing if you're going to really do those things. And I think there's no question in my mind that Adrian Payne right now is more ready than a lot of guys that'll go. I think. Physically, he's definitely more ready. I think he's still got some growth to make, and yet, as I get a better clue on who they're looking at in front of him, who they're looking at behind him, I'd be able to give him better advice. But I definitely, I don't have any faith in some of the projections. It's because some are good, some are bad. I mean, I watched it during the year just because, an assistant would say something, and guy'd have a good game, and he'd be a top 10 pick. Guy'd have a bad game, and you didn't even see him in the top 30. I mean, it just goes so much that way. And so I think that's what makes it hard for the guys.
Tom, do you expect to sign the one player this month, and would you feel comfortable going into next season with 2 open scholarships, or do you keep looking?
I think you keep looking because it's this time of year. Every year we say, boy, I wish we had another scholarship, because there's kids that come on late and things like that. And but we're also really, really homed in on that junior class because we knew it was a good one. So having an extra scholarship or 2, and I guess some of it depends on exactly what happens in the next couple of weeks. But for the most part, I feel pretty comfortable where we're at. And if the right guy came, we could still take one. But having that scholarships bank for next year, where we are with more than a few kids, I think is a good thing.
Playing off that a little bit, is it kind of interesting that you're almost essentially, assuming everyone's back, you almost have exactly the same team minus one guy going into next year, and maybe everyone's healthy. Does it kind of excite you that it's kind of the same parts, but you feel like it might be a little bit more improved at least?
Yeah, it does, because I think two key guys are going to be maybe three key guys. You know, if Bird can get healthy, if Trice, even Gary, and definitely Brandon. But I mean, a couple of those guys are difference makers. But I don't downplay it either. You know, we've talked a lot, and I've watched in the NCAA tournament, and they talked about Michigan State losing one guy. I mean, the national people. You know, Draymond Green. You know, You know, Wood and Thornton. I mean, Thornton was down there. I mean, I'd have died that. You know, that's where we think, can Russell Bird come up the way Thornton did? You know, in a lot of ways. Those guys were valuable to us. So, you know, losing Nix is definitely only one guy, not three. But there were things that he did that we'll appreciate more as he's gone. And there will be things that, you know, that there'll be. I mean, there was a lot of work that went in both ways, but I really believe that this team could be really, really good next year, because I think some of those other players, you can forget just the starting group, but I do think Trice and Valentine, and I do think Ghana and you know, Bird, and I think everybody's going to get better. I think right now, as Russell said in the locker room, we're going to get everybody there working. You know, Keith is in a lot different frame of mind than he was a year ago. I think there's a lot of positives, and when you look at you know, some teams Indiana had a lot of people back. You know, Ohio State kind of lost two big guys, but they had a lot of guys back, and right now we'll have a lot of guys back, and we'll need it, because I'm sure our schedule, you know, we already got Kentucky and Chicago, and I'm guessing the ACC Big Ten Challenge it'll be one of those top teams here, and so I think there's a lot of we're going to Texas, and they got, you know, a lot back on that team, and so our schedule will be brutal in the conference. Hard to say exactly where it'll be, but it isn't going to take a big dip, that's for sure. Yeah.
I'm curious if Indiana, or Wisconsin, Ohio State were going, you'd be waving the banner. And I'm not trying to stir the Michigan pot here, but
Sure you are.
the fact that it's
Why lie?
The fact that it's Michigan and your long-standing stance that it's illegal to root for your rival, are the emotions any different because it's it's a recruiting edge and everything else for them to succeed there? I'm just curious what your emotions are.
I'm not worried about the recruiting edge, to be honest with you. We seem to, for the most part, recruit a little different guys. That it's not the same. That part doesn't matter. I do have, you know, I do have great respect for John and the job he's done. You know, I'll stick by my stance that nobody pulls for their rivalry. I mean, you know, Mike doesn't pull for Carolina, and Roy doesn't pull for Duke, and you know, I'm not sure, but Urban Meyer's probably not. He's probably not pulling for Michigan's swim team to win. You know, the way that thing is, and everything. But you know, I have stood by that I'm pulling for our conference. That's number one. And there's a difference between dislike for your rival and no respect. And nobody will understand that I went through some times here where they'll never end till the day I'm dead. And I downplayed it during the year, but it's just a fact of life. And in fact, I'll be dead earlier because of it. And, you know, so I'm not quite Judd Heathcote or Doug Weaver, you know. I'm not going to go 2 lifetimes. I'll just die once. And the second time, by then, I'll have forgotten about it. But that doesn't have anything to do with the current group either. And so that would be immature on my part. Am I going to carry the Michigan banner? Probably not. If my kid does, he's dead. But am I pulling for the the Big Ten, and do I think they've accomplished a lot? And yeah, I do. And that's the way I'll probably leave it. I have respect, and I think what they've done and the way they've won a couple of those games has been good. I think the Big Ten, you're still getting a couple people acting like, well, you didn't get 3 teams to the Final Four. People are so incredibly whacked out on understanding that, it is going to come down to matchups. It isn't coming down to this. I mean, you got to get teams moving on in the tournament. But boy, when you get to that Sweet 16, Elite 8, so many strange things have happened. They've happened to us in a negative way, and they've happened to us in a positive way. And so it's going to be an interesting Final Four, and I'll be there still cheering for the Spartans.
Tom, it's hard for me to remember, and I
understand that.
I don't remember a lot of things.
You don't have to go on from that.
But it's hard for me to remember you ever going into a season without a key player who had a stress fracture, a groin pull, this or that or the other things. Is that typical of most teams? Do you ever allow yourself to wonder what it would be like to start from day one?
That's a good
with a
question.
healthy
I
team?
mean, there has been some bizarre injuries over the years, but there are some teams we just have played that everybody handles things differently. As upset as you guys get at me sometimes, or vice versa, I'm pretty open about 90% of our things. And so I got a feeling there's injuries at a lot of places. They're just not, some Bill Belichick it. You're never going to know and never going to find out. I'm not saying that's a plus, that's a minus. I think it's just a fact of everybody's got a different way of handling things. And so do I think that we're injury haven around here? No. Do I think that we have had some? My biggest concerns, I don't even mind when Cleves gets hurt at the start of practice. As dumb as it sounds, I can live with that more than when they missed the summer. And there was a couple summers ago, we had like 4 guys miss most of the summer. That is a killer. That is a killer if you're trying to build your program on improvement and not just stars. And that has happened to a couple guys. I mean, I looked at Trice last summer in the end of May, and everybody was saying, God, he's having a great spring, and he's getting stronger, and he's getting bigger, and he's gaining weight, and boom, 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 and then all of a sudden, party was over, and he's 150 pounds, I feel for guys on that, especially guys that like him that are workers, or Russell Bird, who is, he lives, eats, and sleeps the game, and when he goes through that, and then I have to listen to him talk to me about Twitter and how people are just ripping him on this and that, not you guys, but people, they have no clue, they have no understanding. I mean, am I disappointed in Russell Bird? 200%. I'm disappointed because I had a guy who was a gym rat, who loves the game, who is a good kid, and was dealt a bad set of cards. I am also of the feeling that if you can get through that, and he was on the bubble, if you ask me, he was on the bubble, and when he sat there in that locker room and said something after, I said, you know what, he's not on the bubble anymore. He's going to be driven to get it done. Will he get it done? I don't know, but most people can't get up that many times. Most of us, including probably me, and he has. Most people could not do what Brandon Dawson did. Yes, Adrian Peterson showed us all on a national scale, but most people could not do what he did. Most. And he did. And so I think there's, we've had some adversity. You stay away from my guys, and maybe we won't have that bad luck next year, but I think, we're trying to address that now and trying to make sure we get guys stronger in the right way and what we can do to combat some of that. And it has been a lot in the last few years, but I'm sure we had our times when there weren't many either, and I just don't remember them. And I got a lot better memory than you have.
You say, Tom, that Knicks is Knicks, and you kind of get an expression. Can you kind of sum up for me his impact on this team, this program?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. You know, he came in as a freshman, completely undisciplined, no direction, and trying to do something that was very hard for 99% of us to do, and that's keep weight off. Um, and you know, with no real people around him, and what he wasn't very good at, he got better at. You know, he wasn't a very good student. He got better at it. He's going to graduate. He wasn't very light on his feet. He got better at it. He lost probably 100 pounds since he's been here. Definitely 75, back and forth a little bit. What he wasn't very good at, he was an awful free throw shooter. He got really good at it. I mean, there was times in the middle of the Big Ten that if I told my staff, if I got a technical and somebody's got to shoot it, he's shooting it. You know, those things are great. What he was still a little inconsistent at is, I think when you grow up that way, you don't always have confidence in yourself, and that's another hard one for me to see. You know, I don't understand that. I mean, I can be a lot of things, but I think I got faith in what I can do. I had to remind him, you know, he averaged 15 points, 11 rebounds in this tournament. What were you telling me when he scored 23 and 15? He's only the second player in the. What?
Only the second Spartan besides Johnny Green to go 20 and 15 in the tournament.
I mean, think about that. I mean, it's. You say it's not that big a deal. Hey, there's been some pretty good players around here. Never went 20 and 15. I mean, you know, Knicks did it, and he did it pretty well. And you know, he was a different guy because I never had many big guys. I've never had any big guys that could pass like him. I mean, he had an incredible vision of the court. I mean, he'd see things. I mean, it bothered me so much his freshman, sophomore year when he's got a layup. I mean, this was the basket, and he'd catch the ball, and he's throwing it out to a three-point shooter. We curbed that a little bit, and we found somewhat of a happy medium. But he was unselfish, and he had vision. I mean, I got guards that don't have the vision Derek Nix has. And then, of course, off the court, you know, what we think is, however you're brought up, however you grow up, whatever environment you're in, determines what you think is wrong, real wrong, or insane, you know? I mean, we could sit there and say, well, no matter what environment you grow up in, if you go over 65, that breaks the law. Well, then we're all guilty. Because there's not one human being in this room that hasn't gone over 65 or 35 or 25 or whatever the legal limit is. So, you know, I hate hearing, well, that's the law, that's legal, you know. It's what's allowed. We were over in Germany, and there is supposedly a limit, but there is no limit. But they still get pulled over if they're going too fast. You know, it's almost like you grow up in certain conditions, and yeah, there's a law, but if everybody's doing it, it's not really a law. And I think that's what he taught me. You know, I learned a little bit of that from Cleves, believe it or not, when I first started, because I was really not very worldly, living up where I lived from. And I didn't need to learn it again, because I knew what I was seeing. But I saw a kid who didn't really believe in himself. I got a lot of guys that are too cocky. He wasn't cocky enough. I saw a guy that was pretty damn honest. You know, when he did make a mistake, and I asked him, you know, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you skip a class? Did you, what do you weigh? 292, you know. I mean, 99% of the guys would lie. I mean, what are you getting in class? You know, I didn't do very good on this one. Hey, I did real good on this one. You know, I remember when Judd was here, he'd have a meeting, and we always asked Seckel. I can say his name because I always told him I'm going to use it, you know. What are you getting? 3-point, you know. By the end, Judd realized that 3-point to him was a 1 point to some other people. You know, it just, so we deciphered it. We understood it. We grew. Nick's, he almost out. There was never a surprise as far as what he said. There were a couple surprises what he did, and we all know the one that was a surprise to me under the way that things had gone. But there was never a surprise of what he said, and for that I respect him more than I respect some 4-point students that are the greatest kids in America, because at least I knew when I called him in and I sat him down, you know, I was going to get most of the time the truth. And so I respected that. I understood it. I grew with him. I was frustrated a lot of times. It was a lot more work than any of you will know, and it was worth every single second of it, because he is, no matter what happens, going to be a better kid, and the experience was great, and he did a lot for me, and he did a lot for us.